and you're also hearing about how the path that she chose to do this was not the path that was right for her. And in a roundabout way, she got to the path that was right for her. And so it allows the reader, like what she said, to kind of envision what's going on and to kind of like almost like fantasize in a way of like, how is this story going to end? You know, which is really nice because it's like, I want to read more.
Well, I feel like when I read it, it's kind of like unbelievable or something, and then I feel like kind of make up, you know?
Well, I will never, ever, ever say lie in a personal statement. So I'll never allow you guys to do that. But there are ways that you can introduce colorful, meaningful language to really describe your experience well. You know, for those of you that are going to pursue an advanced degree, like I imagine there's a reason. For some of you, the reason might be I just want to increase my income. That's cool. We can find a way to write a personal statement about that. But I also imagine for a lot of you, there's some problem in the world that you want to solve. And you want to solve that problem for a reason. Maybe you have someone in the family that's suffering from something. You want to use technology or science to provide a solution to that. Maybe you come from a community that's like really underprivileged and they don't have access to dentist work, dentistry, I would describe it. And you want to be the person that provides that. Like we can take that sort of passion and turn it into a great hook statement and a really good personal statement. So to answer your question, you know, it can be boring. You know, it can be colorful. You know, it all depends on the way that you write it and the type of help you get as you're writing. Any other comments on the personal statements before I move forward?
I like that it was personal. She talks like it was really about her. Like it didn't sound like regular, like generic personal statement, and she was explaining her feelings, which led to reasoning why she's a good candidate for.
You know, and that's a great point. And she explained her feelings without being negative towards self. You know, when a committee is looking at your application, like I said at the beginning, they want to envision working with you in that program. And if you're super negative, especially towards self, then the feeling that they're going to get is that's the type of candidate, or the type of student in their program, a negative student. They don't want to work with students who are negative, right? They want to work with people that are positive and energized and focused. And so talking about yourself in the right way is very important.
So I think in that one, at what point she mentioned that she was disappointed with her lack of progress during something.
Yeah, disappointed with the institute that
Yeah,
she was working at.
so then I think she followed that up by actually like making a change. So I think that's good that she included that.
Right, precisely. And as opposed to the first one that I read, she talked about something negative and followed it up with nothing.
Yeah.
It's just a negative statement, and that's the difference. You know? Good job, guys. Okay, so this is what a personal statement is not. It's definitely not an academic paper with you as the subject, right? What you want to do is you want to kind of, like I said, invite them to know about you in a personal way, a way that wants them to, or incites them to want to know more about you. It's different than the ways you guys have been taught to write thus far, which is all focused on research and science. It's definitely not a summary of your resume or a summary of your CV. That's a great way to have a very bad personal statement. It's not a journal entry. So, you know, you hear the word personal, and sometimes students feel like I just need to make it as personal as possible. So I'm going to write about, you know, like I came from this environment, it was awful. I came from this environment, it was awful. And really create this kind of like sad story of a personal statement. And that's not also a good way to approach it, because now the committee is going to feel like you're just trying to pull on their sympathy strings and get accepted to the program because they feel sorry for you. And they're not going to feel sorry for you. They're going to feel sorry that you never learned how to write a personal statement. They're going to move on to the next applicant. You know, so you don't want to make it just like a, you know, a Dear Journal or Dear Me or this sob story about your life. Now you can include some sad elements if they're part of what is motivating you to go to that program, but you don't want the entire document to be one sad story after the next, because that's not going to paint the picture that you guys want it to be. And that's that last piece here. It's not a plea or justification. Okay, so earlier I talked about the kiss of death. So here are a couple things that definitely should not show up in a personal statement. The first one, self-congratulatory statements. It's okay to talk about your accomplishments and your awards. You know, as Michael mentioned at the beginning, you should talk about some accomplishments, especially if they're relevant to the program and they impact you getting in. But if your entire document just comes across as like bragging about one thing after the next, they're going to view you as that type of person, that you're conceited, that you're arrogant. And again, they don't want to work with students that are like that, because they're going to feel that you don't have the type of humility that makes you teachable. You know, and they want people that are teachable. They want people that can contribute to the research that they're conducting on their campus. Same thing with the self-centered statements. We talked about the third one, overly emotional stories already. This last one I addressed earlier. These are all very cliche statements, and again, you don't want them to appear. Life is a road, life is a journey, life is a book. giant snooze fest. Nobody wants to read that, and they won't. You know, if you open up your personal statement with a really tired quote or an arrogant quote or some sort of cliche statement, like that's the only sentence they're going to read. I promise you, they don't want to see that in a personal statement. Inconsistencies and misspelling. The inconsistencies piece, you know, remember at the beginning I mentioned two biggest errors in personal statements. When a personal statement doesn't flow well, you just have like a collection of ideas. Chances are there's some inconsistencies there. And again, that's something I can help you guys with. We can find a way to make it flow and make it one consistent document. And misspellings and poor grammar, I can help with some of that, and of course our writing center can help with that quite a bit as well. So this is an important slide. So a lot of times people will write a personal statement and they'll write what they think the committee wants to hear. And again, that's a big mistake. You know, like be authentic, guys. Like you all have a special story that's unique to you, and that's what they want to get to know. They want to get to know you on a personal level. And if you write just what you think they want to hear, inevitably when you get to the interview and they are excited to interview you because you wrote this perfect personal statement, they're going to be able to figure out that what you wrote isn't in tune with who you really are. And this is the best way to fail the interview, right? Having a personal statement that doesn't really communicate who you are, and then they find out. So be authentic. And again, if you have trouble with that, if you have trouble identifying where your motivation is coming from, let me know. We can sit down and we can figure it out. We can write a personal statement that's authentic to you, that captures all the different points that we've been talking about. And again, they want to, remember, they're trying to envision working with you. You know, especially like PhD programs, right? They're pretty selective with who they let in. And like you work very closely with the faculty in those programs. A lot of them do research. You guys are going to be researching with them. You have this sense of humility, this sense of being teachable. They want to envision working side by side with you. And a really good way to do that is having a personal statement that conveys who you are. They want to know. So the hook, like we talked about this quite a bit already, so I won't go to this slide too much. I think the most important thing here I guess they're all pretty important. Definitely sets the scene. Like I said, it's an introduction for them to read more. If you have a boring hook or a boring introduction, they won't want to read the rest of your document. So you want to make sure that the beginning is good in a way that entices them to get to know you. The second one, the maturity piece, I think that's a key word here. If you're mature enough to look at your life and say, these are the experiences that have all contributed to me, both successes and failures. These are the experiences that have contributed to me wanting to pursue this profession, wanting to pursue this program. Maturity is the way that you write that without sounding like you're writing a sob story or begging for their entrance, right? And again, I can help you with that, guys. The last one, it can be tricky. It's tough. I've mentioned this a couple times. You guys have not been taught how to write personal statements. And that's not anybody's failing. It's not judgment. It's just all your writing, your graded writing up until now has been analytical, science, and technical in nature. It hasn't been personal in nature. And so it can be kind of tricky to start off. And I promise you, if you bring a personal statement into my office and the introduction sucks, I'm going to say this sucks, it's the most awful, no, I'll say that. I'll let you down easy and I'll say, look, we need to work on this introduction. And I'll help you with it. You know, I feel like I'm pretty approachable, I'm pretty like that, so I'm not going to criticize you too harshly, but I'm also not going to let you apply to a graduate program with an awful personal statement. Okay, guys? I will help you with it as much as I can. Okay, so when you're thinking about your hook, right, when you're thinking about the introduction, right? Like if you think about the one that I read to you guys, it really kind of creates almost like a mystery, right? It entices the reader to read more. And the way you do that is by tackling the senses. You know, if you can make the readers feel like they're in the presence of whatever's happening, like that's a really nice way to make them want to know more. And you do that by things like this. You know, the scent of butter floated in the air, my concessions line elongating into the snake of hungry moviegoers, all the way to the entrance doors. That's a pretty good setting, and you can see it. We've all been to movie theaters, hopefully we've all been to movie theaters, or at least somewhere where you can smell something enticing that people gather to. And when a lot of people are about to go to a movie, they all line up at the concession. So this is a nice way to really paint a picture well of exactly what's going on. Next, you want to wrap it up, so you want to tie it in. I knew then and there, watching all the people waiting in line for overpriced food before their summer movies, I wanted to study food science. Okay, so now I kind of know this person a little bit. I know they've had a part-time job. I know that they think the food at movie theaters is overpriced. And I know that they want to study food science, and I know why they want to study food science. So it's, again, a way to invite the reader to want to know more. So this is another link, and again, if you guys want a copy of this, let me know, and I'll send you a copy. You'll get the hyperlinks. But it takes place in real time. You know, sometimes you can use a little past tense here, but you want people to be able to see it. What it's not is a summary. Like, you don't want it to move too quickly. You don't want to summarize your complete motivation for entrance into that program in 1 or 2 sentences. You want it to almost be like a movie, you know, like playing out for the person. A short film, guys, a short film. 5,000 characters or less, typically. But you don't want it to be just a summary. You know, a little bit of background information is okay. A little bit of dialogue is okay. But you want it to be a scene. So here are some. Let's see. We're doing really well on time. Any questions so far before I move on to some final tips?
One question. So I've only done like one personal statement, and it was like a paragraph for this organization. But like typically, what's the do they have like a character requirement or?
It's a good question. So a lot of them do. Like what I see the most common character requirement is between 4,500 and 5,000 words. That seems to be the most common one. Some programs will shorten that, and they'll say like 1,200 words or less, or 2,000 words or less. And then there's some programs that don't have any character requirement. They just give you a prompt. Like, here are the 5 things we want to hear about. Right. And then the challenge there for students is that it's very easy to be too verbose and put too much content in because you're trying to answer these 5 content areas. And sometimes less is more. And they give you just a blanket, write as much as you want. You know, being concise is a good way to get the whole document read. If it's too long, they're not going to read it all because they're going to get bored of it. So really it just depends on the program. You know, at the beginning, it's one of the good ways to prepare for a personal statement is to really research the requirements of the programs you guys are going to apply to. And when you can identify, they'll have the prompts there of what you have to write about. Part of the application is they have to show that to you. And so in searching the programs, you can look at, okay, I need this personal statement for this school, this personal statement for this school. The mistake is to just have one blanket personal statement that you use for every school. Remember, they want to feel special. They want to feel like you picked them. And so reading those prompts and knowing exactly what they're looking for is the best way to prepare for character count and for content. So here's just some tips. Definitely make a significant impact. If let's say your test scores aren't where they should be, maybe you have like 2 solid letters of recommendation and a third one that's kind of weak. Maybe your GPA isn't quite what the average is for entering into that program. A really well written personal statement can really push you over the top for acceptance. Like, if they can sense your passion, if they really get this desire to get to know you better, you can overcome some other sort of shortcomings in your application. And the opposite's also true. Like, let's say you have great test scores, you have good letters of recommendation, and then you submit a personal statement that's just filled with like grammatical, punctuation, spelling errors. Again, giant red flag that you don't know how to communicate in the written format, and that will really hurt your application. So having a well-written personal statement, again, like I said at the beginning, I'll say it again, I think is critical to the application process. Second one, avoid writing at length about your personal history. Relevant here is key. If they want to know what your motivation is for the program, what you can contribute to the program, why you picked that profession, stick to those 3. Don't go too much off topic. Again, you want to have a nice hook, but you don't want to throw so much personal information at them that you miss out on the other prompts or that they get overwhelmed with getting to know you. So the right amount of relevant information is important. Definitely number 3, I cannot stress this enough. I don't know how many, I guess if there's a third biggest error I see in personal statements, this would be it. Not answering all the pieces of the prompt. Like sometimes students will get so wrapped up in having a great hook, telling this personal story, that they'll forget to talk about why specifically they're applying to that program. And almost all the prompts that I've seen want to know, why did you pick us? And if you miss out on that element, it's going to hurt the application. So definitely answering all the prompts. Next one, be clear, be honest. We talked about that. Definitely the next one is super important. Have someone read it. If you're like, man, I don't like that guy who presented, I don't want him to read it, that's okay. Like, find someone else to read it. Because someone else reading it, especially if they read it out loud, will help you guys uncover inconsistencies that exist within the document. Silent reading is okay, but our mind sometimes moves faster, right? So we'll read things quickly, and we'll even put words in that are missing. It's amazing how the mind works. Reading out loud is very different. It's a lot harder to do that. And so even if you are just completely terrified of someone else reading your document, stand in front of the mirror and read it out loud to yourself and see if it makes sense. But I highly advise having someone else look at it. Next one we talked about, and of course the last one with the hook, we talked about that too. Okay, so that's, okay, we still have about 20 minutes left for those of you that want to stay. And I have a survey at the end for you guys to do too. But any questions about personal statements, anything that we've covered? I know it's like a ton of information thrown at you in 45 minutes, so I'm happy to answer questions that you guys have. So customizing a personal statement. So let's say you're applying to a doctoral program in physics, right? Just to pick one. That may not apply to you at all, just for the sake of argument. Different colleges are going to have a different degree, right? Maybe related to that. And so you want to make sure in the document you mention the college by name, and you mention the specific program title by name, right? And so if you just say Doctor of Physics, maybe that doesn't apply specifically to the different schools that you're applying to. So there's going to be different elements like that that you want to be specific to the school. Also, different schools are going to have different components of their prompt. Some schools really don't care what your motivation is to get into that specific field, but they really do care about what you think you can contribute to the program. And so addressing that in the right way and having a specific personal statement for that program is going to be how you tackle that.
So right now I'm in the process of applying for some scholarships, and some of them ask for a personal statement. So do you think we should approach that differently than we would for graduate school?
It all depends on the prompt. Like in my experience, like scholarship personal statements are usually a little bit shorter in length. Like they're not going to ask for 5,000 characters, they're going to ask for a little bit less. I think the key there is making sure that it's grammatically correct, making sure that there's no punctuation, syntax errors, stuff like that, and then answering the prompt. Definitely, I'm happy to read those too. So if you're like, man, I got 3 for these 3 different scholarships, I'm happy to look at them. So that's really cool. Any other questions, guys? Me? That's it. So does anybody want a copy of the presentation? I know one person, 2 people. Okay. So just jot down your name and email address. Make sure that the email address is printed legibly. If it bounces back to me, I have no way to find you other than just showing up to another event. But does anybody else other than 2 you guys want this? Okay, a couple more. Yes, just pass it around everyone once they can have it. If you guys don't mind, knock out the survey for me. Any questions not related to personal statements? I know that's the content area, but we have more time, so.
So we having a career fair this semester.
Yeah, great question. So on April, at the beginning of April, we're actually having 2 career fairs. One of them is going to be here at UHD. It's going to be all majors. The second one isn't hosted by us, but it is the biggest career fair in Texas. It's called the Texas Career Fair, and it's going to be the campus location where it's hosted changes every year. This year it's going to be at HBU. That's on April 7th.
Oh.
Yeah, so both of those are coming up. If any of you guys feel like you want to go to the career fair and need help preparing for it, let me know. I'm happy to walk through your resume with you and happy to walk through how to prepare for those events.
How to reject job offer, but stay in contact probably and like.
Good question. So how to reject a job offer? I think it's much like dating, you just ghost them. Just kidding, guys. Turn off the recorder. No, just kidding. So the best way to reject a job offer, so let's say you're in a situation and you have like 2 or 3 offers, you can only accept the one, and you don't want to leave the other 2 employers or 1 employer hanging, right? And it's actually very unprofessional to do so, and potentially you burn a bridge. A lot of professions you guys are going to learn are very small, close-knit communities. When you think about bankers, you look into the city, you see all these different banks. Bankers move banks every 2 years because we know the raises will get when you transfer, right? And so you develop this network, and everybody kind of knows everybody. A lot of industries are like that. So what you don't want to do is just leave an employer hanging if you give them an offer. That's a great way to create a bad reputation for yourself. You never know what company in the future you might apply to where that same recruiter is working, or someone else from that company that you left behind. So to answer your question, I think it kind of depends on what your goal is. If your goal in rejecting them is to get them to kind of offer you more money to accept, there's a different approach there than if you've already made your decision and the answer is just no. If the answer is just no, we'll start there. If the answer is just no, and you know for sure you don't want to work for company B because you've already made the choice at company A, I think the best thing to do is call them. The more professional you can be, the better. Call them, say something like, I think taking kind of an ambiguous approach is nice, and say something like, I really appreciate that you guys offered me this position. It would be very humbling to work for your company, and I'm sure it'd be a great experience. I've had some changes in my life that unfortunately are going to prevent me from taking your offer. Leave it at that. You don't want to say the other approach. Let's say you wanted to compete for you, right? Then I would probably say the same thing, but at the end I would say something like, unfortunately, the company A has offered me a position that pays 10 grand more than you. I'd really love to work for your company. Is there any way you can get close to that? See what they say. Worst case scenario is they say no, and then you still have this other offer with company A. Best case scenario is they say, yeah, we can't actually get close to that number, and in fact, we're gonna beat it if you can sign today. Perfect, give me the 11 grand and I'll sign and tell us how the company goes. Something like that. So that's how I approach it, but the more professional you can be, the better. Definitely don't just, leave them in the wind.
And
Like, you wanna let them know.
the company that I reject, trying to get information on the company that I accepted, what should I answer?
I think it also, again, depends on what your goals are. If they're trying to get information on the company where you're accepted because they want to compete for you, then that's a different conversation than if they're just trying to see which competitors are trying to steal you away. And you also have to ask yourself how comfortable you are with that. If you've already made a commitment to company A and you know that's where you want to be,
Yeah.
then I would just leave it at that and say, I've just had some changes in my life, I'm accepting this other offer because it fits in better with the changes in my life. Leave it like that. Sometimes less is more. Because again, you don't want them to feel like, man, she chose this other company over me, because that may hurt their feelings. All right, guys. So there's a sheet going around for this presentation. Does anybody still need this link? You're good?